Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this 4-episode series, which is generously underwritten by Sage, we're going to be talking about the power of documentaries as learning tools. And in that discussion, we'll cover the full range of documentary instruction, from creation to classroom. We'll talk about instructional techniques, learning outcomes, distribution models, and, of course, effective librarian and faculty collaborations. We're lucky to be joined by a fully cross-functional group of guests, including a librarian, filmmakers and producers, faculty, and a publisher-distributor. Joining me are Set Hernandez, a documentary filmmaker who most recently directed and produced the film Unseen. Virginia Espino, a film producer and continuing lecturer at the César E. Chávez Department of Chicana, Chicano, and Central American Studies at UCLA. Sarah Feinbloom, a filmmaker and the founder of the documentary film production and distribution company Good Docs. Gisèle Tanasse, film and media services librarian at UC Berkeley, and Michael Carmichael, senior director, library editorial at Sage, which acquired Good Docs toward the end of 2024. In this final episode of our series, we talk about how to utilize engagement data for collection development of documentaries and other visual media. We also discuss the sustainability of documentary film production in today's political climate. Okay, so I want to, for this segment, bring everybody kind of back into the fold here, and so these questions are for all of us to talk about, and maybe Gisèle, I'll start with you and ask just what kinds of engagement data are you looking at for collection development in visual media, in particular in documentaries? And how does that data kind of come into play, as you're subscribing to and or purchasing, media for your collection?
Well, I rely on some of our traditional data. I would say there are you kind of, if you've been doing this as long as I have, you have this sense of the like heavy hitters, the kind of canonical films that will be used. And I think at the most basic level, librarians, the best service that we can provide to faculty and to students is reliable access to things over time, so that they know that the content that they need for teaching is there, and knowing that our instructors have so many time challenges and political challenges and logistical challenges that just making sure that the content, the kind of core canonical things are there for them. But to me, in terms of looking at data, what we see a lot is a focus on clips. And so I tend to not be too focused on ROI or on like how long of a film people have watched, because you can get very far in the weeds on the data now. It's cool. It's cool to be able to see the parts of the films that people love the most, but I don't tend to worry about nickels and dimes in terms of spending around what portion of the film is used. But certainly each librarian, I think, has to look at their funding, how much money they have, and deciding what the right balance is between subscription for convenient access and ownership over time that takes into account what Virginia was talking about, is these films that have, that we're responsible in some sense for preserving, because that footage that makes them so wonderful makes it so that they tend to go out of print. They're not available because it's very expensive to relicense that footage and continue to distribute it. So sort of finding the right balance for each individual collection around making new content available, but owning things over time so that we have a reliable collection.
Yeah. Um, so we've been hinting at this over the course of the last three episodes, and hinting at sort of today's political climate. And I want to ask, all of you, um, if you could talk about sort of not just the sustainability of documentary filmmaking in today's political setting, but like and sort of the pressures on research currently and funding and maybe discuss kind of contingencies or the paths that you see forward to kind of sustain the format of documentaries. And um, Sarah, I'll kind of open up that to you first and see what you have to say.
Sure. I'm so glad you're bringing this up because it's really kind of fundamentally what we're talking about is protecting this source of independent documentary knowledge. And
Hmm.
you were just talking about kind of the archival part of it and being able to go back in history and how important these stories are for us to understand who we are. And there's a fragility to this field, this business. It's extremely expensive and time consuming to make a good documentary.
Right.
It's not just taking out your iPhone and recording something. It's research and thought and access and time. And as Set was saying, spending 7 years. And I know for Virginia and Renee for No Mas Bebés, many, many years and archival footage. And unfortunately, a lot of for what's happening right now in the United States, a lot of funding sources are really evaporating. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard from several good docs filmmakers and beyond that they've just lost all the funding to finish making their films. Whether they were critical of the current administration or not, their films were canceled. And so we are in a very challenging time for documentaries. And that's why the relationships and the support that we have in universities is so critical because librarians and professors, all of you you are a way to get our films out there, to make sure that they're protected, that they're part of collections, and critically to put money back in filmmakers' pockets. I mean, it's a
Mm.
really important feedback loop. These filmmakers don't get money from, CNN or I mean, it's just these are, especially in the Good Dogs collection, these are independent films and therefore they're not censored. But this is very serious and deeply concerning. But what I would like to say is that documentary filmmakers are incredibly inventive and they're addicted to making these films. They're passionate. They're completely determined. They'll use we will use our credit cards. People will do all kinds of things to get their films made. And so we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of filmmakers taking great risks. They may be risks that are, put themselves on the line in terms of the things that they want to make films about. But I mean, that's kind of been part of our profession is to take these risks, is to tell these stories, is to realize the fragility and the importance. Like maybe this is the last time, you'll get to hear from this person before they die and they're the only person that speaks that particular tribal language. And
Yeah.
documentary filmmakers are they're going to just keep doing it and they're going to find ways, and it will be, my prediction is it's going to be challenging, but I can't imagine that we're going to go away.
Hmm. Set, I want to follow up with you on that. I mean, what are you seeing out there in terms of getting a project done?
For sure. Thanks so much, Bill. And just echoing what Sarah said, it's hard to get rid of us. I'm reflecting as you ask this question, I'm reflecting on this book called Decolonizing Methodologies by Linda Tuhiwai Smith, where she says the remembering of a people relates not so much to the remembering of a golden past, but rather a painful past and people's responses to that pain. I'm saying that because I feel like in the current context, especially in the US, for especially if you're not used to the level of exclusion and repression that so many of our communities have already experienced before, and people living in authoritarian regimes have experienced before, this could feel new, But I'm saying all of this because this is not the first time in the history of the world that like artists, journalists, storytellers are experiencing this level of repression. And maybe to the entire point of the work of Good Docs and Sage, in many ways, the archive that we are contributing to, there are many times that we can also learn from that ourselves, seeing stories of filmmakers, artists, journalists in other parts of the world who are navigating repression, and us finding a sense of, oh wow, I am not the only one going through this right now,
Mhm.
And if they were able to do it, we're able to do it. We will sure be able to do it too. And I also feel that so much of the discussion around sustainability as of late has been around finances, and distribution in the film world, which is so like important and at the forefront. And just also lifting up that I feel like for me, as someone, part of the reason it took our film so long to make is because we experienced a lot of systemic barriers around, undocumented immigrant filmmakers not being able to be eligible to submit for certain grants. So, like my journey entering into film was already like the journey that I'm going through right now. So I'm not in it's not news for me,
Yeah, yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at is just that find your people, and when you find your community, it's I think also a lifeboat in finding your sustainability, considering the crises that we are experiencing right now.
Hmm. Mike, I'm curious, as Sage, kind of take a perspective on this as well in terms of being an organization that can help perhaps with that sustainability question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some very really deep issues here, and sustainability is really key, and it comes in different forms. I think a vendor's responsibility is in a number of areas. I think one is about helping establish and then socialize the value of the documentary film in the context of its value to support education
Hmm.
is a key thing. And we've been working on that. I know other vendors are working on that, and we want to deepen that learning and to really promote that as far and wide as possible. And we've been talking about a lot of this on this podcast, but it comes down to partnerships, and doing active research and other things, and just really sort of putting it out there. I think flexibility is absolutely key around distribution. We've talked a bit about that here. Um, and having a kind of a laser focus on the support for the filmmaker, the librarian, and the patron. I mean, that's not an easy balancing act, but we have to do it. There are issues around funding and budgets, accessibility, affordability, funding models for documentary filmmakers, and the sustainability of media generally. And we've been discussing that. And I think it's absolutely vital for us to do what we can to help the distribution stream as far as possible, as wide as possible, so that we can support the filmmaker so that they can help make their next great important film. The stories are vital, absolutely vital. They have to be heard. And the stories are made with great passion and often quite a bit of vulnerability and sacrifice.
Hmm.
And it's a deep responsibility that we feel to ensure the survival of those stories, not just for now, but in 50 years' time. We
Right.
need to 100 years time as far as possible. So I think it's really important for us to be innovative, to think around different licensing models, different media preservation mechanisms. We need to meet customers wherever they are, whatever their acquisition strategies might be. That's really crucially important. And so, that flexibility, both in terms of business and customer approach, but supporting filmmakers through the right compensation mechanisms and generally other ways to lift them up, help their stories be as present on campus or wherever it might be as far as possible, so that we can really support this precious media type and these stories in a what is now a global village of higher education. So I think we feel that responsibility very, very deeply. And I think the partnership with Good Docs, and certainly what we've been learning in the last few months, really shows that even more than perhaps we had realized. And it's been just wonderful hearing just some really fantastic, deep stories through this podcast series. And actually, that really illustrates just how powerful this mechanism, this media form is. And our responsibility is to work with our partners and our filmmakers and all to really help surface its value and preserve it for as long as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Virginia, Gisèle, any last words?
Organize.
There you go.
Organize. Because I'm a member of my union at the university level, and I feel like documentary filmmakers, I know that there are organizations, but is there some sort of effort to maybe unionize or create something formal to agitate for filmmakers with the government? And also with, in Hollywood, I think about what impact it would have if Netflix bought as well. I don't know if I should be talking about Netflix. We're talking about Good Docs, but I'm just thinking about like how documentary films aren't really considered as part of the filmmaking industry per se, unless you're, Ken Burns. That just seems really unfair. That there's certain anointed people who are getting their films in the mainstream circuit.
Yep. Excellent. Well, folks, that's pretty much all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time on this. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You just heard from Set Hernandez, a documentary filmmaker who most recently directed and produced the film Unseen, Virginia Espino, a film producer and continuing lecturer at the César E. Chávez Department of Chicana, Chicano, and Central American Studies at UCLA, Sarah Feinbloom, a filmmaker and the founder of the documentary film production and distribution company Good Docs, Gisèle Tanasse, film and media services librarian at UC Berkeley, and Michael Carmichael, Senior Director, Library Editorial at Sage. This series is underwritten with generous support from Sage. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.